Quah Order. Hello and welcome to Quah Order, a podcast that takes an inside look at Issaquah Police Department. I'm one of your hosts, Timothy Smith.
And I'm Corporal Marty Martin with the Issaquah Police Department.
And we are your hosts for Quah Order. And on this episode of Quah Order, we have a special guest. We have Issaquah Police Chief Scott Behrbaum. Welcome, Chief.
Good afternoon.
Well, it's great to have you here on Quah Order. I guess we'll just start right in with it. How long have you been police chief for the city of Issaquah?
I've been police chief for a little over 2 years. I was sworn in April of 2014.
What's the story? How did you become police chief with the city of Issaquah? Where did it all start?
Well, I've been with the city since August of 95. I was hired as a patrol officer back then, and I've held various roles in the department, from everything from patrol officer to training officer. I've been a school resource officer, a narcotics detective. I was a patrol sergeant, a patrol commander, and then I was selected to be the chief of this organization in, again, April of 2014.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question. Is it kind of rare for someone to start from beginning and go from basically an entry-level police officer all the way to chief in one department?
Well, I think every organization is a little bit different, and everyone has their different, career path. Mm-hmm. I've been very fortunate to be at the right place at the right time, and been able to be a part of this organization as it's grown. From when I first was hired, we were about 20 officers, and now we're about 37 officers. So we've grown significantly, and our city has grown significantly as well. But when you're talking about growing within an organization or coming from within, it happens quite frequently, but it also depends on the city and the organization, what it needs when they select their next chief.
Mm-hmm. What inspired you to become a police officer?
Well, let me see. I grew up with a father who was a coach and a teacher. So I grew up with that kind of mentality about helping others and trying to help others learn and help them, just to learn. And I think growing up with that service mindset or being around that really influenced me from an early age of wanting to be that. As I was going into college, my dad, of course, said, teaching's a good profession, but what else is there out there? And which kind of led me towards the direction of law enforcement and wanting to help others, because it's not just about arresting people, it's about helping others, and that's what really drew me to this profession, plus just having a chance to have a variety as well. And I think probably you guys are discussing in some of your other podcasts as well that there's a lot of variety that our officers see on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. So the combination of those two things led me to become a police officer.
So that kind of jumps into, so what is your policing philosophy over these years? I'm sure you've developed a way to look at policing. What is your philosophy on it?
Well, I think my philosophy is one of community service, and I think it's apparent through the actions of our employees, whether it's our police officers on the street or our dispatchers who answer the call or our people in the corrections in our jail. It's about serving the community. It's about partnerships with the community, and so part of that philosophy is what can we do to serve the community better? And along with that, a couple of my other, values is family. I think family is really important, and it helps our officers, give them a compass, of taking care of family. And everyone that we serve in our community has a family, and we want to try and do what's right for that person and for their family, and we need to be thinking about that. We also need to be thinking internally about family as well. So we reinvest in our own people to make sure that they are better trained, better prepared to help our community members. So I guess that's one of our values, family. Continuous improvement is another one of my values that I believe are philosophies. So it's everything about what we do, how do we do it better, but also then how do we serve our community better. So if there's a way that we handle a certain situation, I hope that we look at it afterwards and say, well, what can we do to do it a little bit better? How can we help our community members a little bit better? How can we become a little more efficient with our time and our resources? So that's another one. But the continuous development piece as well, or continuous improvement, continuous development, that goes back to that training our people to make sure that they're prepared for the next big issue. not just on how to be a better investigator, but how to become better at working with our community, how to become a instructor, how to work out, how to be prepared for that next incident.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, as police chief, what is your expectation of the police department as it serves the community when they're out there, interacting with the community?
Well, I think it goes back to the values, and we talk a lot about values in our department and what's important. And again, family, service, continuous development, engagement, those pieces, and that's what we expect. And I say we; it's not just me. I think it's everyone within our organization expects that we treat people like family, and we want to treat them with respect. We want to make sure that we're engaged and do what's right to help them at that moment. Everyone's an individual. Everyone has their own backstory, and we need to be able to be open to that. We need to be listening to what they need and be able to adapt to that.
Mm-hmm. So basically, an experience if I was to have an experience with an Issaquah police officer, I guess my expectation is that I'm interacting with a human being, right?
Yes,
or
absolutely.
something,
Absolutely.
That's what it sounds like. That there's a relationship there, or an expectation that there's a relationship
absolutely.
there.
It's easy to get caught up in volume, or our officers are busy, our dispatchers are busy, our jail staff are busy, and it's easy to get done with the task that's in front of you. One of the things that I do talk about is quality over quantity, and I would rather make sure that our people spend quality time with the people, whether it's a victim to a crime, it's a witness, because I think if you spend a little bit more time with that person at that moment, you're going to help them get through that situation. We see a lot of things on the street, and our people hear a lot of things, or they see a lot of the day-to-day, and it's easy to get caught up with just processing. But when someone calls the police department, that might be the most important time of their life at that moment. And if we treat it as just handing them a piece of paper, or it's just a process, you really miss out on that ability to help somebody. And I think, again, if you focus on quality over quantity, and spending that extra few moments to make sure that people understand, or we get them connected to a service, or we get them connected to somebody that can help them with the next step. Because maybe we can only get them to some point of feeling better, but if we can get them connected to somebody else to help them recover a little bit more, or to help regain some property, or just to make them feel a little bit more secure or safe, then that's more important than just racing off to the next call.
Right. And to me, just as a layperson, it just seems that would be one of the biggest challenges of this job, is that every day you're out there, and not to put it away, not to try and compartmentalize. Thank you, Marty. Because you're dealing with a lot of emotional and stressful situations, and how does the department deal with that and keep that ability to go out and engage and not just go from call to call to call? I mean, that's just to me, that's just a really challenging thing.
Well, it starts from who we hire. Again, we look for those values, those people that want to help and want to make that difference. We have a constant conversation internally within our department of why we do what we do, and we recognize those extra little efforts. It's not just the big cases that we recognize their efforts for, but it is those day-to-day little things that make the difference. And I think if you recognize those and you reinforce those, that's easier to recharge that. Plus, I admit it, I get a lot of value out of it when I see when you see that you've had an impact on somebody and you've helped them. And I think a lot of our people do that same thing. A lot of our officers, they feel that too. When you sit there and you see somebody that's had a major incident, major tragedy, and when you first get there and they're shaking and crying and upset, and you're able to help them calm down, help them to feel safe, and you can see the change in their body language. You can actually see them visibly relax. I think we all feel like, okay, we helped it. We're helping this person, and that just feeds that of saying you recognize that.
Yep.
I think it goes back to also of just, again, internally talking about what's important and talking about values. And if you think about family, and I know we've talked about this internally as well. Is like, well, how would you want your family treated? Mm-hmm. How would you want your sister, your brother, your mom, your dad? How would you like them treated when they're in a crisis? Or even if it's not a crisis, it's just a simple thing. It's just a simple thing of asking for directions. We can easily say, you have a smartphone in your hand, why don't you check it? Mm-hmm. Well, or what we can do is we can spend a few minutes, draw them a map, show them, or even take them, there, or help them give them directions. Mm-hmm. It makes a big difference. It just reminds me of a story of one of our officers who had came across someone whose car was broken down, and our officer was talking to the person, and they were in a panic, and because it was their first day on the job. Oh. And our officer actually drove her to work.
That's great.
And made it. It's a great excuse, of course. I mean, of course, I'm sure the employer was looking at the person getting driven up and dropped off by a police car. What's going on here? But I mean, it actually, I think that goes to show of like that's the extra step. Yeah, we could have just called the tow truck and said, okay, well, good luck. Well, our officer took the extra step of making sure that they got to their first day of job. I mean, that's huge, and that's how I think everyone would want to be treated. And I think if we continue to do that, I think we continue to build that confidence or that that relationship with our community.
Oh, that's great.
Well, talking about that too, that internally we always do. I'm not saying I need to validate what the chief is saying, but we do have those conversations, even if it's in the middle of the night within our squads. But it's the accountability piece that we also really want to make sure that, okay, we're having these conversations and we're doing these things, but it's if somebody has an opportunity to do that or would be out of line to do that, keeping them accountable and what our vision is, the culture within the department, within our squad. That's huge. And so there's a big accountability in stepping up sometimes. We have to do that sometimes at home with our kids or with our other family members and say, hey, you're not doing this right. Or, hey, I think you did this, it was a great job, and it goes both ways. But being able to do that and keep people on the same page and on the same line, that's how these goals, how these different, how the culture stays alive. It doesn't start to dwindle. It doesn't start to kind of diminish, because if it does, and I've been here long enough and we've been here long enough where we were starting to feel that we lost that luster. We lost that vision that we needed, and we needed to reboot it. And we did that, and I think it's because we had to keep people accountable. We had to keep everybody on the same page to move forward, and that was a fun time, because growing up similar to Chief is playing a lot of sports, being a team atmosphere. That's what's across the street. And I say across the street, people are driving in their cars. They don't know what I'm talking about. But that's what it's. I've heard this been said a couple of times, and it's so true. Is that being an officer is the biggest team sport, because there's so much to gain and there's so much to lose, And it's how much you want to put into that piggy bank. We've talked about that before. How much do you want to put in that piggy bank? So if you have to withdraw something, high risk incidents. We'll get to that, or the simple day-to-day with a citizen who's in need and crisis, or just saying hi and to kids walking in a stroller going down the sidewalk. Those are all big pieces, of what we're all about. And being accountable, looping back, is a big part of that. So, I think that's
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it sounds like there's a great communication there. It's always topical. It's always on the mind, and that's how you keep it, and that's how you implement something like that. I would take.
Absolutely.
I could see one of the challenges being as the city grows and the department grows. I mean, how do you keep that would be a challenge to me. Right now you're at 37. Say you're up to 50 at some point. How do you keep that as you grow? And as the city gets bigger, you're going to get bigger crime challenges, I would assume. I mean, is that a thought process that you go through at all?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things is I'm always trying to look down the road and say, what's next? I've already said it earlier in this conversation of what's next? What's the next crime? What's the next challenge? And I think the way you approach it is you plan for it. And we know that the city's going to continue to grow. We know that what policing is today is not going to be what policing is tomorrow. And we have to be prepared to evolve. And that goes back to one of the values I talked about earlier about is continuous development, continuous learning, and adaptability. Those are all pieces that how you prepare for it. You have to be strategic, because if you wait for some of these challenges, you're going to be behind. So how do you prepare for the future? We're always training our people to be our replacements. We're training our next supervisors. We're training our next leaders. We're continuously doing that, looking down the road of who is doing what within the organization and what the community is going to need. We try and work with the community as much as possible in having conversations about what they need and what they expect. Because when I first started here in 95, is a different expectation of what police were to do and were not to do. And today, we have a bigger expectation. Let's talk about human services, for example. Human services has always kind of been a component, but there's a lot more overlap with human services now. Policing is not just about law enforcement. So we are known as law enforcement officers, but if we really only stuck to that piece, we wouldn't be helping the person with a broken down vehicle. We wouldn't be helping somebody who might be in need of food, clothing. Right? That's not law enforcement. So we do talk about trying to be peace officers. So what are we doing to help keep the peace? What are we helping to keep and support our community? So when you're talking about the growth, we're always keeping an eye on trends. We're always trying to look at what's next. We're preparing. We spend a lot of time investing and training our people, because you need to keep adding those building blocks, that strong foundation of how to investigate, how to work with the community, how to be more sustainable, how to be instructors, how to be just how to continue to develop, and as I said, what's next. We're looking at the different trends. But I think you approach it by planning. And so as we do grow, if we do grow to double our size, you start that by, again, making sure that tending to culture, making sure that everyone understands what our values are. Right. You hire and you promote those people that have those values that are right for the community. That's really important. And it's easy to lose track of that, but that's always on our mind. So how do you keep building our people? How do you keep preparing them for that future? So when you say, how do you do that? Well, you do that today. You do it. You've done it the last 5 years. So before we got to this point where we had a lot of turnover. So in the last 2 years, myself coming from within, being named chief, well, that created a commander position. Shortly thereafter, we had our deputy chief retire, and that created another opportunity. So that creates a ripple effect through the organization. So if you hire from within, there's going to be vacancies. We were planning for this for the past 5 to 7 years. We've been preparing people for that. So you have to be forecasting. You have to be strategic on those. So if you ask how we do it, we're doing it now. Okay.
So I think, Marty, you had wanted to bring something up with the chief, I think, about high risk, low frequency incidents and how we prepare or something.
Right. And so for those who don't know what that is, so it's the incidents it was unfortunate years ago. We did have an incident where we had what's called an active shooter here in town, and that's a high risk in regards to what is occurring. There's great danger there. There's a high risk that somebody could be seriously injured, killed, things like that. Low frequency of the part of this is that it doesn't happen very often. And that being said, here in town, it hasn't happened, as from my prior knowledge, being around the city for 10 years since I've been here. That was the first incident. So high risk, low frequency. Now, throughout the state, throughout the country, this kind of was brought to light with Columbine back in '99, and there were other places around the world where they were experiencing these types of situations, either in schools, churches, businesses, but we weren't. One, technology wasn't up to speed so we could share that information quickly. It took a while. And sometimes it faltered if things were happening in Europe. There's always been some sort of, you could call it what you want, I'm not going to get into that, but incidents involving high-risk incidents that are occurring there. Now we're seeing more and more here in the country of these sort of things. So I just wanted to talk specifically about our department. Obviously, that's why we're having the conversation, but high-risk, low-frequency incidents since then, what's kind of, and this is a question for you, Chief, is that since really Columbine, 99, how have you seen the department and kind of the community change with the uptick in these sort of things? Not necessarily here in the city, but within Puget Sound, Washington State, West Coast. I mean, you could go as broad or as narrow as you want.
Right. Right. There's no denying there's been a huge uptick in mass shooting incidents, even in the United States. Mm-hmm. So how does the Issaquah Police Department deal with that?
Sure. So law enforcement in general across the nation has been obviously experiencing new challenges when it comes to violence. And there's always going to be the next evolution of that. And so we're always trying to stay ahead. We're trying to look at what's occurred in the past and learn from the past and then apply what lessons learned and see what we can do. So this conversation started years ago. So one of the first, I guess, active shooter investigations was back in Moses Lake, back in several years ago, a couple decades ago. Mm-hmm. But as the conversation has come, police departments say, okay, how do we approach this? So it's a multi-prong approach. It's everything from training your people on how to address it, equipping your people on how to address that, or making sure they have the proper equipment, coordinating with other law enforcement agencies on to address this. Public education piece. So there's the preventative public education piece, and then of course there's just the education piece of understanding what they are facing. I think a lot of focus, at least from our agency, we've done the internal training, and we've done the internal equipping, and that brings on a whole nother conversation about that. What kind of equipment do police officers have, and that's been a conversation across the nation as well. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the ones that we can talk a little bit about is the public education piece. We recognize that if we can prevent those types of incidents from happening by identifying potentially people who are in need of help or people who are on that path and we can head it off, I think that is a big portion. So we work closely with a lot of employers, we work closely with schools, we work closely with a lot of different groups to educate people on things to be aware of. Really what it is kind of goes back to like the kind of be a good neighbor. Help each other out. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of your friends and family. Be aware of your coworkers and what some of the challenges they're facing or troubles they're going through, and being aware of that. And if you see something, say something. So I think that's a big piece of this that we've been really focusing on within the city of Issaquah, as well as working with our employers and working with our with the school districts as well. Now, internally, of course, we do train for that event. September 24th, 2011 is the event that you were talking about earlier, Marty. Yeah. And we did prepare for that, and we had equipment, and we had training, and as much. Now, our officers do not look forward to that day, but we are prepared to respond to it when we have some sort of a high-risk, low-frequency event. And you do have to spend time on that because those are very impactful incidents, not only for the community, but also for the employees. The officers that responded that day were impacted, but there's another group internally of our employees that were impacted as well. Our dispatchers. Mm-hmm. We had 3 dispatchers on that day when phone calls started coming in. One of them was their second day on the job. Wow. So it's not just the officers that respond. So we focus on a lot of our staff for these high-risk incidents because we recognize that it's not going to just impact the officers on the street. it is a big team. It's a big family within our organization. And
Absolutely.
if one of our people is going through something, we're there to try and support. We're aware of it, but it impacts us as well. We worry about that. On that day, actually, we assigned someone to call each and every one of our employees to let them know what had happened, because they need to know and they need to find out about some of the details so they can understand and they know that our people are okay and have a general idea of next steps. And I think that's important. So the preparation for those high risk and low frequency events, again, it's that continuous training. It is that working with the community. It's the equipment. Now, that equipment conversation, of course, can go into a whole nother piece, and I know that sometimes that's portrayed as the militarization of police. It can be, some people can frame it that way, and or they could frame it as, do police have the necessary tools to perform their job function? Right. And it depends on what kind of frame or what kind of lens you want to look at it through. But the way I look at it is we want to make sure that our people are equipped to help people. And if we have people who are at risk, if we have people who are in harm's way, we want to get them out of harm's way, and we want to help get them protected as soon as possible.
No, that makes sense. I guess one of the, you talk about these high risk, low frequencies. But there's other situations where officers are put into situations where force may be necessary. How does the city train, or what is there because I've said it before, as a layperson I don't know, what is the litmus test of force for an officer that's on the street? Is it the same for every single police department across the board? Is there an industry standard? Does it change from police to police? Is it situation to situation? And how does that work?
The answer is yes, because you asked me a lot of questions.
Sorry, I apologize about that.
There is a lot of standardization on use of force or application of force. Police agencies have policies related to use of force on how it should occur. There's case law that says how force can be applied and under what circumstances, and what the burden of proof, if you will, in regards to use of force. Now, every situation, you're right, is different, because you could have an officer could respond to an incident and comes into a room and there's 50 people in there with chainsaws, right? Trying to go extreme for you here. Right. There would be a different response than someone walking into a room and it's and you're talking to a room of kindergartners about when to call 911, right? So there's a different response. That's a wide range of people who are with chainsaws coming at you versus doing a presentation to kindergartners. So there is a wide range. It also depends on the training and experience of the officer that's responding. There's also the aspect of a lot of environmental factors, availability of backup, communication, weapons that are potentially present, that, again, the individual actions of the other individual that is there. Right. So it can be a tough situation. And then, of course, everyone at the end of the day who is not in that stressful situation is going to, dissect that individual incident and pick it apart for what it was, looking at each individual piece. Right. So, and it's tough. You're making split-second decisions under a lot of stress, and you have to make a decision that could be life or death for anyone. Right. So we do a lot of training on that. It's everything from the policies to we do practical training on it through defensive tactics, through firearms, through other scenario-based training as well. We review incidents topical incidents that come across the nation of saying, okay, we do like everybody else does. We look at it and we say, okay, if this was you, is this the right choice? Is this the right decision? Right. Could we do something different? And then we talk about that and we say, okay, if we were in this position, could we approach it differently? We want to provide ourselves enough time, right? Because, we talked about split-second decisions. Right. If we can increase that time and give ourselves a chance to make better decisions, and maybe that is not come out from cover or concealment, and give ourselves more observation time to be able to make a decision. Can we do we have enough time to give somebody verbal commands, or is there enough, or maybe there isn't enough time?
Right.
So time is important in that equation. There's a lot of like the video cameras in cars. There's body cams, and again, that's one perspective of the incident, and there could be cell phone cameras of the incident as well. So there's all vantage points. There's what you can see and what you can't see. So there's a lot of those pieces, and the resolution of the cameras. What is the facial expression of the person that's standing there, as opposed to all you see is maybe the body language, or maybe you see something that's in their hand. Maybe you don't. So there's all sorts of things. There might be something that's obvious underneath their shirt that looks like they have a weapon that the officer's responding to. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. So it's important to train. It's important to, it's continuous training. It's continuous dialogue, because no officer wants to use force. It would be fantastic if every day the officers, when they show up to work and they deal with a high-risk situation, that no force is used. That would be fantastic. But there's a lot of people, there's different factors that come into play that sometimes make a decision that an officer that uses force.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's not an easy subject.
No,
and it's not a one size fits all. And every time, and again, each officer that responds there, you think about it. If an officer shows up to a situation, when they show up, they have all the tools on their belt. Which tool they use depends on the situation. But remember too, because those tools are there, that means there's also a weapon there.
Right.
And there's sometimes a conversation that comes around with people coming after officers, and they don't have any weapons in their hands. And well, you're right, they might not, but are they trying to get one of those tools or weapons from the officer? So, and again, these are all these things that are looked at and examined after the fact. If it's it's a deadly force encounter, or even if it's not, even if it's just something just as they put them in handcuffs. So. But going to policies, we also have policies that review those incidents. So it's not just that it just happens and then no one looks back at it.
Right.
So we review all of our use of force. We review it and say, like, if someone complains of an injury, we look at it. If we use more than just simple handcuffs, we look at it really closely. We have on-duty supervisors that are reviewing all the reports. So every report that the officers write, the supervisors review. So, Marty talked about accountability. That's that accountability piece of it just starts off simple, basic reports, having officers show up to observe to report what they observed. They write reports about it, but then also there's a review as well, because we want to make sure that was there the force that was used necessary. We also want to look at the effectiveness of the technique that was used, because maybe there's a training opportunity. Maybe there's a tool that we need to refine. Maybe we need to do something a little bit different. Is there an opportunity just to approach it a little bit different?
Right. Yeah. It's a very, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
That's a huge, deep subject. We've talked about a lot today. We've kind of gone through the whole breadth of it. And, I guess my final question for you before we kind of wrap it up is, looking back, 20 years from now, what does success look like to you?
That all the officers and all the employees that have worked for the department have had successful careers, that they've made it out safely, that we have the fantastic community support that we have now, and we continue to have that and grow that. Those are the main ones. I would love that when I retire, that there is somebody ready to fill my shoes and to take this department to the next level and make it even better. Then that's success. More importantly, I talk about family, and I think all of our department members, I want to see their families be successful. Their kids grow, be healthy, happy, and successful. Internally, same thing. My family. That to me is success. I want the values to continue, and I want them to get deeper into our department. That's success to me. So if I have somebody to take over and this organization keeps running, the day I step out the door, like they didn't even miss a beat, then that's fantastic. That's success. I want the community to be happy. I want now if we take it next level, if we want to be a little selfish, I would love to see. I want other organizations to come and want to study our organization and say, wow, what can we learn from these guys? These guys are doing something right. And if we get to that point, which in some aspects we're getting that now, we're getting some of that. But if other organizations want to come to and say, let's make a case study out of the Issaquah Police Department, and we can learn so much from them, and good things, that is, not positive things, that is. Right. Then I think that's that next evolution. But in general, I mean, it's, I don't need. I do not need big monuments, about the Issaquah Police Department, but I really want us to continue to grow on the success we've had now, and to build that and the culture, and have people ready to run this organization when we're all stepping out the door. And that's success. That's success to me.
That's great. That's great. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us today, Chief Behrbaum.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That's it for this edition of Quah Order. For Marty Martin, I'm Tim Smith. See you next time.